So I want to share a story with you this morning. So I'm going to talk about the first time I came to Sesshin in the Hollow Bones order in 2005. So not so long ago, not the beginning of my practice. I ran in a meditative Zen-based running style for many years, since the early 70s. And I also was a serious, or have been a serious Taiji practitioner, Taiji player since the 80s. And I sat for a long time by myself, and I realized that I needed to find Sangha to sit with. And so found my way to Hollow Bones. And so I'm going to tell two parts of this story, but the part I want to tell right now is about my experience with you, Vikara. So going to my first Dokusan, we were at the Christine Center and sitting in the hallway, looking out the window. You were Inji, sitting next to me. And it was a profound experience for me, a profound experience. Just the energy of sitting with you. So delightful and alive and deep. So thank you. It was her job to get me ready to meet with Junpo. So I want to show you what these are, so it's not a big mystery. So there are two here. And can I have your Raksu, Sanji, for a minute? So not everybody knows what these are. If you can see this on the Rakasu that we give in Hollow Bones and on the certificates that we give for Jukai, for lay ordination, stream enters vows, and for priest ordination, and also for Inca, we give Raksus. So my Rakasu, which I'm not wearing right now, that I got at Inca is brown. And Vikara has a brown one too, but she got it a long time before Inca. But anyway, those are brown. And usually the rest of them are black. And I think Junpo started giving priests blue ones after a while. But on the back, we do the traditional thing and we use these chops. And there are two of them. And so one of them is a very traditional chop. Although the Chinese people tell me it's like the characters for Hollow Bones are not easy for them. But so, and the Chinese read from top to down, from left to right. So the one that says Hollow Bones, which is this one on here, that's this chop, it says Hollow Bones Zen. And so top to down, left to right. And so Junpo had these made, and I always used to borrow them from him. And because, you know, we lived near each other, it wasn't too much of a trouble, but, and he taught me how to use them. And this other one, which is not really printed in the traditional Chinese form, and you have to forgive me because I'm not perfectly sure, but I think this one reads right to left because it's not columnar. Mm-hmm. So I think it reads right to left. And it says Guan Shi Yin. And so what we say Kuan Yin or Canon, the Chinese expression of Avalokiteshvara, that we chant about in the Heart Sutra, the first translation of that was by a guy named Kumarjiva, and he translated it Guan Shi Yin rather than Guan Yin. And over time it got shortened to Guan Yin. But that's why there's three characters here, because it's Guan Shi Yin. anyway. So it isn't so mysterious what happened earlier. And then there are chops like when we do jukai or ordination ceremonies for instance, Zen River, there's a chop for Zen River and there's a chop for me. And Junpo had a chop. So the people who were like me that were ordained by Junpo or Doyo or Vikara, they have Junpo's chop. But we won't use that anymore because that's not hollow bones. But these are hollow bones chops. And I'm so grateful. It's such a delightful surprise. See, you're still at it.
I know you will be wise in whom you chop.
So wonderful. Oh yeah. So I want to tell the other part of that story. So, and the story goes back just a little bit. How long am I supposed to go? Okay. The story goes back just a little bit. My first introductions to Zen were from Thich Nhat Hanh, from his books. And particularly his book, The Miracle of Mindfulness, but I read others. And there's a woman who's passed, her name was Sherry Maples, and she was a student of Thich Nhat Hanh's, and she was involved in the criminal justice system in various ways. And I eventually got to know her. But as she was becoming a Dharma heir of Thich Nhat Hanh, one of the things she was supposed to do is host a retreat. And so she hosted a retreat at the Green Lake Center. It's on the maybe west side of Green Lake, a little on the northwest side of Green Lake. And it used to be called the American Baptist Assembly. It's a great big place. It was a farm a long time ago, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place, wonderful place. So she hosted a retreat there. And it was for criminal justice professionals as well as practitioners, but that was the special interest of it. And someone offered to send me to it. And I thought about doing it. So, you know, I was a government official, some of you know that. And I was worried about getting my religious interest connected with my professional life as a government executive, you know, because I wasn't supposed to do that. And there was no way that I was going to go to the retreat and it wasn't going to be religious for me. And so I ended up not going, and I deeply regretted it. So here's Thich Nhat Hanh. He came here, practiced. He practiced in an area that was very important to me. And for some silly reasons, I didn't go. And I don't remember exactly when that was. 2003, 2002, something like that. And so I was looking for a Sangha to practice with, and I found what now is Zen River Sangha, practicing at the Unitarian Fellowship here, which I was a part of. And I decided that even though it didn't make much sense to me to drive from Oshkosh to Appleton to meditate, that I would do that. So I got involved in Zen River Sangha, and pretty soon there was going to be a retreat at the Christine Center, and Junpo was going to lead the retreat. Anyway, I came to Green Bay, I met Junpo, saw his performance at a public talk, and I decided I'm going to that retreat. And a part of my attitude about all of that was that I had held myself back from participating in the retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh, and I wasn't going to do that again. Right? So I had the energy of, I knew that I needed support for practice, and I had been deepening my practice because I was in kind of serious personal trouble because I was not in integrity in the way that I was living at the time. And I decided that the best way for me to to change that was to deepen my practice. So I go to the retreat, and I want to just tell you something that's maybe related to this talk a little bit. The night before I was going to have my Dokusan with Junpo at the Christine Center, there was a big storm. And, I had a kind of a dream experience that could have shamanic interpretation. So in that experience in the storm, there was an avatar of Junpo, and all of the lightning and everything that was a part of that, this great avatar of Junpo, basically telling me to be serious about my practice and so on and so forth. And and then Vikara, the day later, before I went in to see Junpo, settled me down a little bit. But what's important about this, I think, is that what we bring to practice. And so what I want to talk about today a little bit is, well, what is this practice? How do we practice? And it's what I hope as we do Dokusan that you will talk to me about. What are you doing? Right? What are you doing in practice? So we could say that my experience that night in the dream and all of that was a manifestation of ignorance and delusion. Or we could have a kind of shamanic interpretation of that dream that says it was a expression of how important this is to me, right? Of the energy that I bring to practice and the sincerity of it, right? So, and of course, a dualistic expression of delusion also, right? But that doesn't mean it's meaningless or pointless. And one thing that we have to learn in our practice, it's not about shoving all of that down. It's more like, can we open into it and try to understand? Can we look at practice as an inquiry, a process of inquiry? And this, I believe, is in the deepest of our tradition. And it was also something that Junpo and I shared. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Here's a little verse from, this is from near the end of the Lankavatara Sutra. The translation here is by Red Pine, although he's scholarly and consulting everybody else's translations. And Doyo, who's deeply scholarly, may say he doesn't like Red Pine's translation. I don't know. But this is in the section that Red Pine calls Final Questions. And I believe this is the 81st. This is the way that the versification that D.T. Suzuki made in his translation of this. This would be the 81st verse. And what's said about the 81st verse, section 81, previously in section 79, the Buddha dismissed 7 kinds of impermanence advanced by other paths and said that the teaching of the Tathagatas, which is kind of another name for Buddha, is neither permanent nor impermanent. Here, Mahamati, so this sutra is all the questions of an advanced practitioner, bodhisattva practitioner called Mahamati. Here, Mahamati wonders if this also applies to a Tathagata's body, in or out of nirvana. The question concerns a Buddha's Dharma body, not a Buddha's apparition or reward bodies. The Buddha reminds Mahamati that such assertions are inherently flawed, as they are based on a duality that is imaginary and that does not apply to Tathagatas or Buddhas or to the knowledge of Buddhas. So this is a verse form of his answer. His answer is longer and it's in prose, but the verse form is quite short. The Buddha then repeated the meaning of this in verse. Neither permanent nor impermanent, but perceived as permanent or impermanent. Who sees the Buddhas like this, doesn't give rise to mistaken views. The meaninglessness of accomplishments results from permanence or impermanence. Whose knowledge is free from distinctions leaves permanence and impermanence forever. Once a position is established, a multitude of truths appear. Who sees nothing but mind cannot be touched by words. So this is quite deep, right? So this whole discussion about permanent and impermanent is about duality. But it doesn't say, it says perceived as permanent or impermanent. And the meaningless of accomplishments resulting from permanence or impermanence. Those whose knowledge is free from distinctions leaves permanence and impermanence forever. Whose knowledge, right? So it doesn't say that our goal in practice, this is talking about, he's telling Mahamati how to practice as a bodhisattva. It doesn't say that our goal in practice is to somehow reach a state where our everyday living is gone. He says, perceived, right? Perceived. Who sees the Buddha as neither impermanent or permanent, but as perceived this way? Who understands their perceptions, right? That their knowledge, that is, underneath their perceptions, their knowledge is free from these distinctions of duality. And says this, which sometimes I use a verse by Baizhang, I wish I'd have brought it today actually, that kind of established this, talks about this in a more didactic way. Once a position is established, so where we take positions, where we get confused and think that the ideas that arise in our mind about the way things are actually the way they are, as opposed to ideas that arise in our mind about the way things are. A multitude of truths appear. A multitude of confusions appear. This is what he's talking about, right? And who understands this cannot be touched by words. It doesn't mean, doesn't live in a world where there are words. It just means that their capacity to see is not clouded by words or by duality. So how do we achieve this? In inquiry, in looking, our meditation practice. And what's being talked about in the sutra is how to realize the bodhisattva path and the awakening of a Buddha. How do we realize this? By inquiring, by being interested, by looking clearly, and by reminding ourselves how easily we're confused, and paying attention in this. So Hakuin, who gave us the Song of Zazen, which we read so that whatever kind of babbling I do now is you've heard a good teaching, he talks about 4 ways of knowing, right? The 4 ways of knowing are mirror samadhi, unity samadhi, discernment, and action. So an iterative approach, right? But it begins with the clear seeing our true nature so that our experience has the quality of a mirror. It's not clouded by what we call in Mondo historical hysterical. So Hakuin is giving us a pointer there. And so What's interesting about practice, we have all of these teachings, and all of the teachings are simply meant to point us in a certain direction, right? A certain direction of practice. But practice itself is an inquiry. It's the thing that I like the most about the Eightfold Path, which is called the Shravaka path, the beginning of the path. And sometimes it's taken as a denigration, but it's not. It's the beginning of the path, and we have to begin, right? So, right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort or great effort, right concentration, and right samadhi. I love the expression of this, right, 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 not so denotative, not so prescriptive. It's an invitation to inquiry. What is our understanding? And how does it match up? What is our intention? In our hearts, we understand what right intention is. How does the intention we act with in our life match up to this? And so on, right? Not do this, do that, do the other. Even though we can find in sutras some of that kind of teaching, some of the Buddhist teaching has that kind of teaching, it's to be understood as a finger that points us in the right direction. And our practice is to inquire, always to inquire. What is this? What is this? And how do we realize Buddha nature in living, right? So how do we, if we begin to have the experience of clear seeing through our meditation practice, then how do we bring this into alignment in the way that we live? This is realization. So realization is not about some kind of a head trip, some kind of a logical construct like the babbling I'm doing right now. It's how do we make this real in this life, right? This precious life where we have the opportunity to do this. This is realization. And this book that I quoted from, Lanka, is the Buddhas talking to Mahamadi as avatar for us as people who are practicing in the Bodhisattva path. This is the sutra that Bodhidharma used to start the expression of Zen that we practice in. How are we to practice? And the point of it is toward realization of awakening, toward realization of Buddha nature. And this is what he was talking about in the verse. So we have a few minutes now, and I want to let you ask questions. I have one other reading that I think is pertinent. It's actually a reading that I do often with Jukai, but I thought this reading is very pertinent to at least what I'm trying to convey here, right? And I should say, the point of a conversation like this, a Teisho, is a conversation with the Buddha. And we have a representation of the Buddha here. This is a Buddha statue that Jumpo gave Zen River Sangha. But the Buddha I'm talking about is this Buddha, this Buddha, this Buddha, this Buddha, this Buddha, these Buddhas. And the statue is just a representation. So I sit across from Buddha, and that's supposed to help keep me in integrity here. So any thoughts or reactions or something else that's related, some question you'd like to ask?
Taiso, I'm interested in how you at least I remember you starting out the talk this morning. I thought I heard you suggest that an opening up was the way, as opposed to, and now I'm into the opposing, getting it right. I'm thinking of a Dharma talk you gave a couple Thursdays ago, which was wonderful. Your reaction up in the mountains of, I think it was Colorado, and 80% was okay. And the realization came from your looking at the expectation for yourself that you were capable, and it was important that you do 100% of what your expectation was at that point. And looking at that clearly, you realized that at that point and at that time, it was just fine to sit where you were. And even though you were so close to your former goal. And that, I just say, in recent practice for me, it's been very useful just to see what's coming up, to make space for it. I don't know that this is quite what the Lankavatara, verse section 81 was about. I'm not sure about that, but I do want to just comment on how appreciative I am of your suggestion and others that we simply open up to what our experience is, give it some space, and see what arises from that. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, Manju, and yeah, so let me see if I can give that some context. So one of the things that's part that we say in the Song of Zazen, which has been so helpful and instructive for me. So it says, whether going or returning, we cannot be any place else. And I don't know about any of the rest of you, but I want, as Manju said, I want to do it right. I want to do it completely. And I can be quite impatient with myself. And I take that line in the Song of Zazen to be pointing out something, which is that the real practice is not pretending. The real practice is not pretending. And so I'm here right now, and whatever is arising for me. So the story that you're talking about, Manju, was about climbing up to the Grinnell Glacier at the Glacier National Park with my son. And it's a 12-mile hike, and the total ascent is 2,000 feet, but along the way, there's 1,000 feet back down. So you have 3,000 feet of ascent, and there's a stopping point where there's 4/10 of a mile to go. And I decided to just stop there. And a part of it was, do I really need to drive myself? I could do it. Do I really need to drive myself further? Number one. And number two, what am I doing for my son? First, I'm showing my son that the way for us to be is to drive ourselves. And then the other thing is, how compassionate is that for him? My son is 20 years old. He's an active distance runner. He could run up the last 4/10 of a mile. Why should I hold him back as an old man, moving slowly? And what happened out of that, which was part of that story, is some beautiful awareness on his part, on his own. So I stayed back. I can't be any place else. I'm 67 years old, and I've had a really busy year, and I'm not in the top shape that I've ever been in. So why do I have to make myself prove something or pretend really that that's a good thing? And this is what the Song of Zazen is saying to us. Instead of practicing through denial and projections and so on and so forth, practice here with what really is. This is where it is, and this is where real practice is. And so come to terms with this. And if we want it to be different, so if I want to be able to climb I might never be able to climb the Grinnell Glacier with my son because he's, I don't know, 47 years younger than me. But if I want to be able to climb it with alacrity, then I have a year's worth of training to do so that I'm in the shape to do it, as opposed to, and how's that for everybody around me if my practice is, and the other aspect of this also, in terms of 80%. So we all work here together to create an environment to practice in. And all of us, including me, make little mistakes from time to time. So is what we're going to do beat people with a stick over that? Or are we going to see, here's where we are right now. Let's see how we can grow with this, right? Are we going to practice with a positive attitude of acceptance about this, not nihilistically so, fatalistically so with it, but we still have our great effort, but it's with a positive attitude of acceptance. So I think this is what I was talking about, Manju. And I don't think that there is a part in terms of the striving for the path to be unrelenting. But I also think that this is sometimes misunderstood, and especially for us here now in this culture. This is misunderstood as the whole thing has to be like beating yourself. I don't think you can beat yourself into the way. I think the way comes from sincere practice, right? And so I think that's what I understood you to be talking about, Manju, and just so. So I think it's time to end. I'm actually a little over time, but I want to read this. This is a poem that is attributed to Hui Neng. Hui Neng is the sixth patriarch of Zen, and it's probably because of Hui Neng that we get to practice Zen, because we're not, most of us at least, are not the equivalent of literatis, and we're gaijin, white devils, and Hui Neng was a supposed barbarian from the south of China, not part of the elite, and the son of actually a disgraced guy and a mother who was from the south of China. And this is his poem. Deluded, a Buddha is a sentient being. Awakened, a sentient being is a Buddha. Ignorant, a Buddha is a sentient being. With wisdom, a sentient being is a Buddha. If the mind is warped, a Buddha is a sentient being. If the mind is impartial, a sentient being is a Buddha. When once a warped mind is produced, Buddha is concealed within the sentient being. If for one instant of thought we become impartial, then sentient beings are themselves Buddha, awake. In our mind itself, a Buddha exists. Our own Buddha is the true Buddha. If we do not have in ourselves the Buddha mind, then where are we to seek Buddha? Thank you so much. Can you? Yeah, 5 minutes, can you?